Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Joshua. Today we're in Joshua chapter 8. We're going to start reading at verse 30. We're looking at the last few verses of chapter 8. Now remember, this time in the conquest, the Israelites have basically conquered the central part of the land. They are now in possession of the center of the promised land. The two big battles, of course, have been the Battle of Jericho and the Battle of the city of Ai. Having taken both those locations, they control the center. And now they pause in their conquest. There's still more land to conquer, but they pause for a moment of extreme significance, a solemn occasion to renew the covenant with God, or to remind themselves that they are the covenant people of God. Notice what happens. We're at verse 30 of chapter 8. Now Joshua built on Mount Ebal an altar to the Lord, the God of Israel, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded the Israelites. He built it according to what is written in the book of the law of Moses, an altar of uncut stones on which no iron tool had been used. Now on it they offered to the Lord burnt offerings and sacrificed fellowship offerings. There, in the presence of the Israelites, Joshua wrote on stones a copy of the law of Moses. All the Israelites and all the elders and the officials and the judges were standing on both sides of the ark of the covenant of the Lord, facing the Levite priest who carried it. Both the foreigners living among them and the native-born were there. Half of the people stood on Mount Gerizim, and half of them stood on Mount Ebal, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had formerly commanded when he gave instructions to bless the people of Israel. Now afterward, Joshua read all the words of the law, the blessings and the curses, just as it is written in the book of the law. There was not a word of all that Moses had commanded that Joshua did not read to the whole assembly of Israel, including the women and the children and the foreigners who lived among them. Now in the center of the land, if you look at a map, you will find a place where you'll see Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. These are two mountains in the central range of the land of Israel. The mountains sort of stand opposite each other, and there's a little valley in between. And this is where the children of Israel assemble. They've conquered this area, they're in possession, so they assemble at this area, and they build an altar to the Lord. It's very specific. It's of uncut stones. No iron tool is used upon it. That's all from instruction from Moses in the book of Deuteronomy. Also, Moses had told them they were to do this at this precise location. Half of the Israelites stand on Ebal, and half of the Israelites stand on Gerizim. It's sort of like a choir in two parts, and they call to one another. And they write on stones and build them as a memorial the law of God given by Moses, the 10 Commandments and all the accompanying law. They're building a memorial to remind themselves they are the covenant people. They are under covenant to God, and they are to follow His instructions and His law and His details for their lives. Moses had told them to do this very thing before they entered the land. He said, after you start conquering the land, you'll do this at Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. It will be a solemn occasion. And they call to each other. You remember in the law, it says, if you follow the way of the law, God will bless you. So they recite the blessings that God had promised to give them in the promised land if they would follow His law. And also on the other mountain, they recite the curses. For Moses has also reminded them, you will be cursed. There will be consequences if you disobey the law. So the law, the instructions of the Lord are carefully set out before the people. They remind themselves of the blessings and the curses, the rewards and the punishment for either following and obeying or leaving the Lord and disobeying. They are reminding themselves what it means to be a covenant people. You know, it's a way to remember that we are the people of the Lord, and this land He is in the process of giving us is all by the grace of His hand. We must continue to live in covenant and in faith and in faithfulness to Him. Now, in tomorrow's session, we're going to look back at Deuteronomy and see where Moses gave these instructions and how carefully the children of Israel followed them. But today, just remember, it's important to have these moments in our life where we pause and remember all that God has done for us, all that He has instructed to us in His law, and to remind ourselves that we are the covenant people of God. That's what Israel was doing. They were remembering who they were. They were renewing the covenant. We need to do that in our life as well. There are those times we just remind ourselves who we are, God's people, and renew our covenant with Him. That's what Joshua led the people to do on Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. He's following the instructions Moses had given them. We'll talk a little bit more about this tomorrow. So join us in our next session for our 5-minute Bible study in the book of Joshua.